My name is Prince. I'm Ojeabulu. I'm CEO of Rensource Energy. Well, Rensource is a solar player in Nigeria. What have I done before this time? A couple of things. So I started out my career firstly in the NGO field. So I actually volunteered for an NGO when I got out of NYC, right? And after that, I started working in the telecoms field. I worked with Airtel for a while, more in the projects, doing a lot of projects as a project officer anyways. From that, I went on to join another telecom player, Pan-African Towers, actually. So they do tower business. And after that, I got into Rensource. I got into Rensource sometime in 2017, and since that time I've been in Rensource. I got into Rensource as a manager, and I've grown to an executive position since when I got in about 5-6 years ago. I can still remember till today when I was asked to come in for an interview at Rensource by my former manager. I could mention his name anyway. His name is Akinboye. And he used to head projects and operations for Rensource at that time. Before that time, I've been really, like I said, I was working in telecom, so I lived and breathed. All I did was telecoms, if I use that word, right? That's all I knew. I really didn't know anything about solar energy, really didn't care so much about it. Always known about it as a kid, but beyond the fact that it was useful for solar street lights and stuff, and also the general knowledge that it wasn't really working, I didn't know so much. So when I got that call, actually it wasn't a call, it was a LinkedIn chat. So I just had a chat with him and then we came in. I also did not know anything, right? But I knew I had a very fair idea of operations because I came in as an operations manager in Rensource anyways. And when I started working in Rensource, I had to learn solar from first principles. So I had to go back, and it was a whole lot of learning. Like it was a learning process, trying to understand what it is. What do you mean by charge controller? What do you mean by PV? What is DC? Not that I didn't know those things, but again, there wasn't any business angle to it per se. Our view of solar was, like I said earlier, you pick up some solar panels and that is what it is, right? Or you're doing some solar street lights, government projects. But when I got in, I found it was quite vast. And again, I was always very, very interested in learning, and I picked it up from there. So in summary, what's my view about solar then to now? I would say that, if I had known what it was earlier, probably I would have started my career in the solar field. But that's how life is. Well, I can't remember all the details, but I know that when I started, when I got in, there was a whole lot of learning process, right? I needed to sit down to figure out what exactly I'm doing here. And frankly, when I got into Rensource was a startup, so the company in general was also figuring out the direction. So for me, firstly, it was a very good environment because everybody was trying to figure things out. So it wasn't like I was left out. We had just a bunch of people who knew a few things, knew how to do some stuff, were experts in some other fields, but needed to now make something beautiful out of solar, right? So it was, it was a joint learning process for everybody that was on the team at that time because we had to figure out a lot. At some point, I could remember I had to, get articles to start reading online, trying to understand the first principles, the basics, everything. For context, I was I was called in to be an operations manager, right? And it wasn't necessarily field operations, it was actually back-end operations. So what that means was I wasn't only just dealing with solar installations or managing them, but it was even more about understanding the data aspect, because we had one beautiful system, some beautiful systems that had remote data. You needed to interpret them, you needed to set up alarm systems, so many complex things that in other industries, like in the telecoms field, have been set up a long time ago. So we're trying to figure these things out. So again, I'm not sure I could get a very particular thing, but all I can remember very clearly was that it was a very good learning process, because we had a bunch of people who were also trying to figure things out, and we took our time to figure it together, right? And we learned as we went forward. But overall, right, it was a very beautiful experience. Oh yes, of course there were a lot of challenges. Frankly, I think the bigger of the challenge was not even necessarily the technical bit, right? But even for the fact that the solar field was still a very nascent field actually at the time. This was 2017, okay? A lot has happened between now and that time. So it was quite nascent. There were just a few players, and I was called to do like a very complex managerial role, working with a couple of people who were working with me as my direct reports, right? So there was a lot of figuring out to do. The challenge was even more managerial, right, for me than actually technical, okay? Now, the technical bit was easy to figure out. Like I said, the environment was right. Everybody was trying to figure it out. We had a bunch of engineers who wanted to understand, what we're doing, how we could set up the whole systems. And when I'm talking about systems, I'm not just talking about installations. I'm talking about we're working with original equipment manufacturers to build the next level of the solar systems we're trying to put in place, etc. Right? So I got to find out very quickly that relationship management, people management, managing your energy, your temperament, were even the bigger challenges I had to face down the line. Okay, and that whole experience was really helpful in shaping my managerial capacity, if I would say that, because down the line I went on to do some bigger things when it comes to management of a business. So I started out as, like I said, a back-end ops manager. So after a while, I became a project manager. I was already when I was in the solar field, I was already, like I said, I was working in projects. I had project management certifications and all that. So at some point in call, I moved from that role and became a project manager. Did some very big projects. Came back again, became an operations lead. As at this time, we Rensource as itself already had some very big operations. So I was managing the operations. After that, I took on an executive role, or a senior management role, if I would say, right, as the head of operations. So at this time, I wasn't doing anything technical any longer. I was really focused on product management, profit and loss, P&L and all that. And then after that, I took on an executive role as COO of Rensource and then CEO. So that's about maybe 4 or 5 roles. Yes, I've done quite a lot actually, and I'm very, very versatile. Yeah, I think that just comes from my ability to want to know more and learn more. And maybe one unique thing I just put in is, at some point down the line, I realized I need to do something, like I need to take on something higher, more in executive management. And I think that's really one of the good things when you have support. So I had very, very good support from my managers. They recommended to me that I need to go to business school. I went to business school, right? Took a very, very little break, went to business school. And then on the back of business school, I think after I was done with business school, my horizon, even before I was done, my horizon had expanded so much. So I now understood it was beyond just setting up panels or setting up inverters. There are things around impact that you can make. There are things around the metrics that drive businesses, right, are the things that you can focus on. And then that's how my focus shifted. Well, first of all, I wake up in the morning, I will check all the operational reports. So I have that, what they call it now? I have a penchant for details. So I will go through all the details, okay? The first thing I do in the morning, I check my operational report. So I've been an operations manager, if you've heard very well. So I know the direct translation of smooth operations into revenue, money, etc. So I check that and give my feedback if there is anyone. Second thing is, I check my calendar, right? I need to be sure. I have a lot going on in my life. I have my family, I have work, I'm in a position where I can determine my priorities. So of course, at that point, you need to get your priorities right. So I check my calendar and be sure of what I need to do. And then I make a mental note of my priorities for that day. What are the things I need to do? It can range from different things. Maybe we need to close an investment. We need to review a contract. We need to reach out to an investor. It can be many things, depending on what. And then I put those priorities on a small notebook. My notebook is full. I need to get another one. Put it in a small notebook, and then I get into the day with that. I focus on those priorities, right? And then within the day, some other things will come up, but my focus is always when nothing else is coming up. I'm now focused in making sure that I meet those priorities before the end of the day. By the end of the day, I close and I spend some time with my family. Always try to do that from like 7 to 9 to 10. If there's still more to do, then I try to do it before night time. If I need to work even into the night, I'll schedule my time to do that. Yeah, that's my typical day. Yeah, a tough day will be, okay, well, most of the tough days are a build up to my most critical meetings. And it happens maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So one of my most critical meetings is obviously the board meeting of the company, and I have to make sure that preparation happens. Not even the meeting day, I mean preparations up until that point. So within that point, I always know that there's a lot to juggle ahead of that meeting. Typically, those are my hardest. The days building up to the board meetings are typically my hardest days, actually. I have to do there's a lot of work, there's a lot of things to juggle. So, yeah. So, I think I'd rather go with, will I say, what's always a specific challenge? And it's something that is, will I say, is ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere. It's with almost every business. Cash management, okay? When you get to executive positions, of course, you now understand that you're, at least if as a CEO or maybe a CFO or something, you understand that every business, cash is the lifeblood of that business. So you need to understand how that is managed very effectively. So realize, so there's a lot of focus, at least for me, something I don't joke with, So it's a moving ball, so you have to keep your eyes on it. Because if you take off your eyes on it, you might be surprised where that ball goes to when you take off your eyes. So you need to watch it very closely, set up the systems to make sure that you're watching it, right? So I think basically, if I got your question right, really, is that's most of the times the biggest challenge that is faced. So it's not like it's one challenge, right? But it's something that is challenging, if I'll use that word. So it's challenging because there's a mindset shift. And this is coming from me where I've been in, of course, I've worked in positions where I've not had to worry. All I have to worry about is when is the company paying me my salary, right? But now have to worry because you have staff to take care of. You have lives that are under you need to worry about, right? You have the obligations to different people that you need to meet. So it's a constant moving challenge that always has to be managed. So yeah, I think that's the big challenge. And how you overcome it, just make sure you don't take your eyes off that ball. If you take your eyes, you don't know where it's going to go. A lot. So frankly, I've done projects in telecoms and operations in telecoms. The truth is, if you understand business models, right, there is a very, from the concept of business model, right, there's a very close similarity between the telecoms industry and the solar industry, in the fact that the business has to spend some money, capital, right, establish some things, and then wait to earn revenues over some time, right? The same business model. Yeah, by the time you layer on telecoms, having to, and what is it for telecoms? Telecoms build all the base stations, all these things. Those things are capital being spent. Similar to solar, where you have to maybe spend some capital to do something, right? And then how do you receive the revenue? Telecoms will receive revenue from you making recharging your phone, buying credits, etc., right? Now, the layer on might be different, but the core business model is the same. So having been into operations and projects, because I did the both, right, while in the telecoms field, there's a clear usefulness in how you approach. Not necessarily from the point of the specific technicalities, right? Like, if I start talking about technicalities in the telecom field, they have no relationship with solar per se, right? But the underlying business model are the same, right? So working at that level, because I worked for Airtel, Bati Airtel, right? So that was significant amount of projects, understanding what needs to be built. I worked for a towerco in operations and projects as well, so I understand the rudiments. I think it was very helpful, and really one of the reasons why the manager that hired me, Mr. Kolawole Akinboye, right, hired me at the time was because there were just a few people that understood operations in the telecoms field. Yeah, people could build, could slap panels on the roof, could set up an inverter or anything, but operations wasn't something that the telecom field had understood. In fact, that was the problem with telecoms. With solar field. That was the problem with solar field, because no one really knew how to manage solar. So they needed a unique set of skill set, right? And it now seemed like I had that skill set. So yeah, I think those experiences have been highly helpful and always still helpful till today. Even how I operate, I run the business I manage, right? And I even work with the team that do critical things like projects, operations, etc. So maybe before I answer that, I would say that it's very important that industry peers continue to share information. It's very, very important actually, because this one thing that happens in the career field, especially in Nigeria, is there's no information backed or data backed approach to remuneration, especially for newer fields. People are too lazy to actually just do the work and understand, okay, what are similar companies, not just even in Nigeria, right? In the US, in Europe, in the West, in Asia, what are they earning? And how can we benchmark to those people to see what conditions are they at versus what conditions are we in? People don't do that. They're just lazy. Let's just wake up and fix a salary out of thin air. And what that always creates is it creates a keg of gunpowder that will blow sooner or later. It happened in the tech field, right? People are setting salaries that are not even reflective of anything, have no basis, right? Just because of the fact that maybe they've raised some amount of money and then they have money and then just keep spending on salaries. At some point, it becomes a gunpowder because it blows. You can't manage it, okay? Because you never even had a business in the first place. Now, with that being addressed, I will focus on, in telecoms. Telecoms is quite a matured industry, okay? Solar is not matured, but will be in a couple of years. Telecoms wasn't matured in the early 2000s, so it was a very good industry. So what you always see in the remuneration is when the industry comes up, the remuneration gets to the highest point, and then as skill sets becomes broad and known across the whole base, the remuneration starts reducing, and then the industry becomes less and less attractive. In the case of solar, when I got in from solar from telecoms, of course, the remuneration was better, and even now, the remuneration is still better, okay, than telecoms field. Will continue to be like that for some years. In terms of to make sure that we don't have the same scenario, right? It's important that information sharing happens, okay, on a wider scale. Industry experts with such kind of information to make sure that this information, that data is readily available. Like, what should be the salary rate of a solar installer, right? What should be the salary rate of a manager in the solar field? And try to, so that as companies get have that data available, we can set, and there's no disparity, okay? But generally, right, the remuneration is actually better. I think it will still grow some more, and then as the knowledge becomes wider, the skill set in the solar field becomes proliferates, right? Then you start seeing a reduction in the wage bill, etc. Yeah. Impact. So let me explain the impact. Let me just tell you the impact. Let me tell you, the impact is not maybe your regular impact. It's not about oh, we are helping a lot of lives, because the truth is those lives will have to be helped anyways, right? So being a part of it, right, is not, yeah, it's a beautiful thing for the people, but it's not like I don't know, it's not like philanthropy, right? It's not like the feeling you're getting, because what you're doing is not philanthropic, okay? But it's really about being a part of something that is still very nascent, okay? And the opportunities that provides for, I hope I can count this word properly, but the opportunity what that provides for, will I say advancement, okay, in career, in development, okay. I will say this to the people in the solar field. Like, if you're in the solar field, you are like in the point where the telecom field was in the early 2000s. So it is very easy to become very relevant with minimal effort. That's the word, okay? It's very easy to become very relevant with minimal effort. If you attempt to do that in the telecom field now, it'll take you 15 years to do. Take, for instance, for me, if I wanted to attempt to become the CEO of a telecom company, it would probably take me 30 years to do that. Okay? But I can get as much impact as someone in telecom field is doing, right? Without having to do too much. Not that I'm now downgrading the effort, right? But I'm just saying the universe has presented that opportunity. So that's when I say impact, that's what I mean. I don't mean that I'm helping lives. Of course, I'm helping lives, but that is not in that context. There's going to be massive growth, right, in the solar field. And I think the good thing about it is that there are a lot of players. And forgive me if I keep juxtaposing to telecoms again. In telecoms, you see that there are not a lot of players, right? There are just how many people? Maybe 4 or 5 people. Telecoms is fragmented now. You have ISPs, you have different people. You have tower providers, you have the MNOs, everything. Right? But in the solar field, you have a lot of players, right? What you will gradually see is that fragmentation. That always happens. Everybody starts defining where they want to play because the value chain is large. You can talk about it. There's solar home systems, there's mini grid, there's microgrid, there is commercial and industrial solar, there's utility scale, there is equipment production, there is maintenance service, there's a lot. I can continue, it just comes to my head. There's EPC, the EPC companies, there is solar providers, right? Shout out to like Oxano Solar, for instance. So people will gradually start going to where they'll play. Right now, almost everybody's doing everything, which is okay. It's part of this forming stages of the industry. At some point, as the industry matures, there will now be clear lines. So everyone will focus on the value they know that they will give best and will play there. And when that happens, then it will unlock a new level of financing that we haven't seen. There is financing right now, but it's scattered. But it will unlock a new level of financing that we haven't seen, and that will also explode the growth. So, where do I think I'm going to be? That's why I said I'm fortunate and happy to be in the field at this time, because it's still nascent, it's growing, everything is being defined, even if you think it's not, right? And as it continues to define, we'll find our place there. Rensource itself is already, we've gone through, Rensource as a company has gone through a lot of the stages. We've been in the SHS space. We've done a little bit of equipment manufacturing. We've focused on mini grids. We're now focusing on CNI. Okay, so there's this whole. We're now focusing there, and we don't really want to play anywhere else. So maybe we're very early in taking that decision. The people will come to that realization as they move forward, and then they play there. And I think we'll be one of the biggest, we are one of the biggest players anyways, but we will continue to be that as big as a player can be, that we become a force to reckon with. And I mean, hopefully, maybe my name is mentioned as one of those people, right? Like when you talk about computers, you can't talk about computers without Bill Gates. Then they say, okay, you can't talk about solar without mentioning Prince, hopefully. For me, I think it's the right time, actually. Okay. We need banks. Okay. I don't think we need more bankers because it's already a saturated field, right? We need other industries. We need healthcare workers, but in the solar field, there's an disproportionate amount of growth that also requires that disproportionate order of skill sets. So if you're thinking about it, I think this is the right time, because this is actually the time that you can use minimal effort to do much more, right, than maybe another 10 years or 5-7 years from now, when things have started taking shape and the industry is getting a bit more matured, and then you have to, do what, like the bankers, for instance. If you're going to be in a bank, you're going to be there. Before you can get to the next level, you need to do maybe 4 years. So there's opportunity for rapid growth because of the expansion, and so it's the right time to be in. Okay, don't contemplate on it too much. And please, solar is not about solar. It's not about installing solar. It's much more. Just like the way telecoms is not about masts, okay, or banks is not about just money. There's a lot more. The investment professionals in solar, all right, very good ones for that matter. There is health and safety, right? There is operations and maintenance. There's projects. There is engineering. There is a lot. So you don't need to be hooked. I've seen it so many times, right? People who have been HSC professionals in FMCG become HSC professionals in the solar field, and they're doing exceedingly well. Okay, so you can be a part of that story. Okay, so what you need to do is switch today.